I'm JJ and I'm a in-game director and observer at Dota events. Explaining observing, that's not easy, right? You think, well, just catch every kill, right, isn't it? But the map in Dota is very big and you can only show a very small part. So observing kind of has to be, what exactly do I show at every given time?
I think observing Dota is like the most complex one. I mean, in Dota it also is a lot about like farming, last hits, runes, there are like so many positions. So I think it's in general like super complex to not miss anything and also to show the viewer kind of like a storyline of like a carry, for example, farming so much and then being like this, I don't know, unbeatable hero in the end. So it's a storyline kind of.
In this tournament so far, he's only one of us. At least he's. It's easy to have a win streak on a lot of heroes if your team is.
My name is Johan Westberg. I work as a professional observer within Dota 2, and I've been doing it for 6 years now.
My name is Rickard, also known as skrff. I observe some Dota 2. Dota 2, I think, is really good for having observers because there's so much going on. There's 3 lanes, there's 10 heroes, there's stuff always going on somewhere that's being talked about by the casters, that needs to be shown, small little item purchases, anything you can think of. There's so much going on. I think observing in Dota is like really needed to help tell the story. We usually do main observing. I'm doing like secondary observing, so like the player cams, split push cams.
Major differences between main observer and secondary observer would be that the main observers, you always have the camera on you, unless obviously something goes wrong with the game. Then we have the secondary observer as a backup. But since you have the main observer looking at everything that's going on, you as a secondary observer have to look at everything else and be ready to show smaller things. So for example, if I'm looking at the bottom lane, he has to look somewhere else and like kind of go against his own way of observing just to make sure that we can catch everything.
When it goes in game, we take over and everything we show is on us.
So for me personally, observing means how I can consume the game when I'm in the stadium or when I'm at home watching the live stream. That's really the beauty of the game. For me, that's the channel, how I can see what's happening and how the excitement is through.
Observing itself is a very difficult task and a very fulfilling task, because making sure that the viewer not only sees every kill on camera, but also really important points in the game that kind of help explain the storyline of the game, maybe a comeback because of creep stacks. Small things can be very important, and this is what an observer should show and provide value to the viewer as well.
Find a target, but it's OG finding it. Is there a rebuttal? The stuns around. Ice. This wall needs to come down. Has he actually got it? He's juking around. Ice survived PA. The using wall will crack. They want to re-engage. Here comes your Dark Seal wall up and running. They get a couple of copies. The stuns, they just keep chaining out. Arfed, now he's broken free. Tops at the BKB. That crit from ILTW. Jab's got to leave with a 3-man stun. Jirax, the master of the earth. And he'll actually get even more than that.
Having people right above me, fans sitting right above me, and I could feel the fans going ham because of a play down in production was an unbelievable feeling, and it was so cool. And this is when I decided, okay, this is something I really want to do.
So this right here is the PGM feed, or the main feed that goes out to the stage, to the stream, to everyone watching. I use it mostly to just see what I'm currently producing, or if it looks good, and if everything is fine. The next is going to be the main observer, which is the most important part of the whole pipeline, basically. The camera, the in-game camera, the one in-game camera that's really used at every single stage and at every single game as a backup, but this is the bread and butter. Then the next part is the ATEM multi-view. This is a so-called video switcher. What it does is it takes different inputs and I can switch between different inputs. One of these inputs right here is the so-called draft, when people pick and ban the heroes, which we take from a different PC, so I have to swap between showing the in-game footage and the draft at appropriate times. And we also have some fancy things like a picture-in-picture, creep cams, all of these different production goodies that everyone expects from a Premier tournament. Lastly, the ATEM control is this one. Technically, it doesn't do anything, it's just used for monitoring. So one very important part is also the tablet that we use to control the last stack. I have a bunch of different categories here. I can bring up anything I want onto the main observer right here, basically at the tip of my finger. And then there's things, for example, where we need extra data. This data is of course provided by SAP. And then there's obviously a laptop just to make sure that everything works. I can monitor the server with it, read chat, basically do whatever I want. And lastly, this is EVS. EVS is a replay system, so I can see what the replay machine is going to put out. When I call for a replay, I need to know that it's exactly the sort of time frame I would like to see.
So when you look at computer games as a player, you play the game, you know the game. But when you look at it as an audience, it's a completely different setting, right? So observing is what makes the computer games that you know as a player be able to be presented to an audience in a stadium.
So to talk about observing in Dota, I think is to talk about the addition to the casting team. Before we had professional observers in the scene, we had a play-by-play caster that was responsible for narrating the action of the game, was responsible for controlling the camera, and was responsible for creating a discussion with an analyst. And the addition of the observer, obviously it frees up the play-by-play caster to talk about more in depth about what's going on in the game. But more importantly, it actually adds a third voice to the broadcast, that if the analyst is making a point about item decisions or about some strategic objective that's going on in the game, the play-by-play caster is mentally sort of setting up for the next fight. The observer can actually highlight what's being said on the screen, adding that immediate connection for the spectator.
So commentators benefit from a good observer because you need someone who can help guide the story with you. You kind of need someone who's working with you to tell a story about the individual match, individual player, or any actions that are happening. If you don't have a good observer, then you can't do your job correctly. They kind of go really well hand in hand.
I would say the viewer experience doesn't necessarily know that their experience is being enhanced by observing. For me, and I know that it might be sometimes different for different people, but overall I think an observer is, you will never notice them, but they just are streamlined in the production and in the cast, and everything flows. When a commentator talks about player A doing something amazing, the camera was already showing that. When a commentator says, oh, I'm curious about what's going on over there, the camera is already showing that. And what an observer brings, or what observing brings, is basically a smooth experience in following the story that the commentators are trying to say.
When it comes to what viewers benefit from the observing, most of the time a good observer will go unnoticed. It's a bit of a thankless job in that respect, but when you have great observing, when you catch that moment that is 1 in a million, that's when the viewers will notice it. But it's one of those things that behind the scenes, they don't get noticed unless they're doing a bad job or a great job. So generally good observing is just what you expect to see on the show, and be able to show the game in the best light.
It's funny because for some reason certain events don't hire observers or don't think they're important, so they'll just get volunteers. But there's definitely a big difference in quality of broadcast if you have someone that's trained to do this and has also worked with people like me in casting before. It takes practice and it's actually a job. And because the whole screen is this person's perspective, it seems silly not to put someone that does it professionally in charge.
So my personal observing style, it used to be very erratic and narcissistic in a way.
He was a bit of an asshole, but he came around, a few years ago. He realized hey, it's also important to what's the word?
I got rid of that. It wasn't fun for anyone involved.
He had a tendency at times, even in observing, where he was leading and he wanted you to follow along with his camera.
And nowadays it's more in the same way that Weppas and skrff would do that, where all three of us kind of understand, okay, we're not there to be personal. We want to make sure that you show everything that's important.
You got to be smooth, because in this field, it's always collaborating. You're always at the whims of hundreds of other people.
You want to highlight things that are important, and if the casters miss something, yeah, you can take a jab at them, but it's not like you just want to throw them under the bus.
He's gotten a lot better at ensuring that it's a team process while still maintaining that confidence that, hey, if this is some really good shit, he's going to make sure you know about it.
I'm really excited for when observers for multiple games are really confident and consistent in their own ability, that they start saying, how can we take it to the next level as well? And for me, always being able to get that different angle on the game and the better viewer experience is what I'm excited about.
If you have no instant replays, if you have no ability to look back and see what happened, you miss out on a lot of the action that's happening within that match. If you look at it in the way it happens in esports, it's actually being pushed to another kind of level at the moment. Everyone's trying to outdo everyone by adding in like augmented reality, adding in statistics and stuff like that. It helps give a better complete view of what's been happening in that match. And likewise, it helps us commentators give more of an idea of how this match is going and kind of who's performing well and who's performing not as good.
In general, the main thing that users care about the game is like, you know, who's playing, is the game good, is it exciting, is the patch really good, you know, and when that is good, we have another step, like are the casters telling a good story? Is that good? Okay, next step, how's the observing? How's the, you know, stats coming out? And that's where we come in, is like that, like I would say, second or third layer that is needed for like a really good broadcast.
Data in in-game is really interesting. We have a very fortunate game here that exposes a lot of data, so we can get all the data, but the data is abstract in a way. It just numbers. Getting into an in-game production and having graphics to visualize parts of the data can really help viewers understand context, can understand how exactly something happened on the screen, that the casters were talking about it, provide so many more storylines to the game and really provide a different story about the game than what it used to.
So the first time we met JJ was at an esports event in the UK, and we realized very quickly that our mindsets are very similar with regards to approaching the esports audience. And what Layerth is doing provides tremendous value to the viewership and to the audience. Now, we sat together with them and really thought about, okay, how can we extend the amazing existing stuff that they're already doing and giving it more context based on SAP technology. The result, I think, is new features which are being used across the stream at many tournaments by now and really bring the viewership experience to the next level.
Explaining what Layerth is actually not that easy. It's basically a system that takes data from the game and tries to visualize it in the broadest sense. So if you're someone playing a carry and you say, hey, cool, he's farming a lot of jungle camps, and we can visualize that. A caster would only say, yeah, he farmed a lot of jungle. The observers sometimes showed a lot of, you know, this guy being in the jungle. But now you have a very specific way to show it and visualize it and the viewer to understand exactly what happened in this game. We talked to SAP and they provided the option to have historical context for the live sets we have. So us working on the live part of the broadcast and SAP coming in as a technology partner for the historical part of the broadcast and then fusing all this data together was a very natural and reasonable partnership to do.
So working with Layerth and JJ and those guys, we started like thinking about what is actually possible for us and what actually helps them. So they came to us with a couple of ideas. We had a couple of ideas ourselves that might be helpful to them. And then we worked out a system where they can use their existing analytics and like their existing in-game stuff and solutions and use our extended like historical data to make it even more interesting and to have even more cool insights.
When comparing esports to traditional sports like football, like basketball, like tennis, esports has still kind of a way to go. Everything is digital by nature, so it becomes really easy to collect data and make something out of it. It's just, there's still a lot of potential to unfold moving forward in the future. When you look at traditional sports, they cover everything. In esports, we are still at the beginning of, unfolding those features and giving context to data, which is super complex. These games are very, very complex and not easy to understand to a wide audience. And technology and stats and insights can really help doing that.
The main reason we love working with SAP is because our path before them was on live stats. Nobody was doing live stats before, and we were like, okay, let's just focus on collecting live data about the game. Let's show that, so like current damage that the hero has done so far. Where has he moved so far this game? Or like, what is his net worth through the game? But we always lack that little bit of piece of context that allows users to be like, okay, I see that he did 10,000 damage, but how does that compare to like previous games? How does it compare to the whole patch? So with SAP, it was like a perfect partnership where they could handle the historical data, and we just get the data from them and we combine it with what we've collected, and it just creates the perfect feature, I would say.
I quite enjoy working as an observer because it's like, I've done it for so long now. and it's like having a second family in a sense. You get to see all the players, all the production teams around the world going around, all the talent as well, and it's just it's like seeing your friends over and over again.
I think my motivation is just I love Dota. I mean, I'm really passionate about Dota. It's the same thing that kind of motivates me when I come home from an event. I watch a lot of Dota. Like, I'm away for 2 weeks. I watch Dota day in, day out, and the first thing I want to do when I get home is just play Dota.
What motivates me about observing and keep doing what I'm doing is mostly the people that I work with. All the talent, all the broadcast talent, they're like my second family. They're good friends. We regularly hang out at events, you know, have a good time. So seeing them at every event is just fantastic because you kind of reconnect. And doing observing also is obviously fun, and it's great because you feel like the work that you put in prep and getting better at it also works and it helps. Oh, I do actually get some thanks for my job from time to time, mostly if I don't miss a lot of first bloods. Sometimes it's Twitter DMs, sometimes just people coming up to me at events, which is really fun and really cool because having people appreciative of your job is the best thing ever, basically.